Over the years, marketers have been analyzing the different generations baby boomers, Gen X, millennials. And recently, we have seen there's a red thread among all of them speed. They all want everything to happen now. My name is Francisco Serrano, and I am the Chief Speed Officer at One to One and the host of the Now Gen podcast. Join me. Each episode, we talk about what's happening with brands, see how brand professionals across different industries cope with this fast-changing market, and live up to the expectation of this now generation. Welcome.
This episode is brought to you by One to One, the fastest day-to-day design, content, and digital studio. One to One has been the premier partner for many Fortune 500 companies, proving that tight deadlines shouldn't be a hassle.
Hello, and welcome again to another episode of the Now Gen podcast. Very excited today because it's kind of a different shooting today. We are recording from One to One, which is our partner. It's the fastest day-to-day design powerhouse based all over the world, but here now we are in their hub in Mexico. And before talking to you, who's joining us right now here, I want to tell you what we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about innovation. We'll be talking about brand experience, and most of all, the essence of the brand personality when you get what dealing with the now generation. So for that, a very special guest, Nick Horan. He's the Global Brand Experience Lead for Reckitt. Very excited to be here with you and that you were able to join us and live here. So thank you for that, Nick.
No, thank you for having me. I couldn't resist popping by as I was in the area, so thank you for having me.
Exactly, popping by. He's based in Amsterdam, but that's very humble of you to say that. Thank you, but before we get into business, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you became the global brand experience lead at Reckitt.
Sure. So I spent the early part of my career as a product designer, as a junior mechanical engineer in the heart of Silicon Fen, which for those of you that know it is part of Cambridge, mainly working on biomedical device projects. And I realized at that sort of time that it was a fantastic way of learning how people interface with products and so forth, but I think I was missing something a little bit, which was around branding and the reason people actually engage with brands at a sort of more psychological level. So it's at that point I decided to retrain a little bit, pivot, as some people say, and move into branding. And I found my way into a career with some different agencies, notably Web de Vlam, and as well as in-house. So I've worked with the likes of Reckitt's global power brand portfolio, as well as some kind of key clients around the world, including Unilever, Procter & Gamble, and so forth. So I think that's really how I sort of entered my career, and is kind of why I'm now sort of in FMCG for branding.
And you know, we were talking offline about speed and what is the influence of what's going on with how the agility influences brands and technology also. Can you tell us about how do you see speed and technology influencing the brand experience?
Yeah, sure. So I was quite struck by a piece of information that I heard online, and I'm not necessarily, I can quote its exact source, but in the 1950s, people were sort of exposed to something like 500 brands per day, impressions. And now that's something like 5,000 today. It's growing massively, the amount of interactions people are having with brands every given minute, second, whatever you want to call it. And in which case, as organizations, as brand owners, we have to be faster, more agile to ensure that we're giving people fantastic brand experiences that really are memorable, they're distinctive and long lasting. And speed is frankly the enabler of us having more conversations with more people. And I think it's super important to work with agencies such as yourself that allow us to kind of explore new channels, new technologies and so forth, to allow us to kind of create those conversations, to create those meaningful moments with our consumers all around the world.
Yeah, and talking about, fast, sometimes, speed is, it's associated with not so good work.
Yeah.
And there's a saying that says perfection, speed over perfection. What can you say about that?
I think speed must be harnessed at the right points in projects. I think if you have spent enough time to really think, to really understand the foundations of what you're actively trying to achieve, you've laid the strategic intent, then actually that allows you to act with a lot more precision, with a lot more speed. Speed for the sake of speed is pointless, because otherwise you might just be a busy fool. But if you're utilizing it in the right way, it really allows a competitive advantage for brands.
Yeah, I was talking to one guest. He was the global growth director for the biggest candy manufacturer in the U.S. And he was telling me that speed is important in innovation, right? And you have two sorts of innovation. One that is like the day-to-day kind of, you need to be there. And the other one that is just, he called it the smart innovation, that it might last a little bit longer than one day, span over 3 years or 2 years, like innovating something that it's crucial from the get-go and something that it's really setting up something different. What are your thoughts about that?
I think, first of all, we've got to acknowledge that 9 out of 10 innovations will die. And it's kind of a curious one because operating at pace allows you to test and learn on innovations. It actually sets them up for success. But it also allows you to kill ideas that maybe you might be in love with, but for whatever reason just won't land properly. So we can utilize speed to test and learn quickly, but also kill ideas that actually they're just not fit for purpose. They're not the right innovations for a brand or for a business. So being able to strike that balance between thinking up front, making sure that you're putting the legwork in to give an idea enough roots that it will take root into a business, but also utilizing it for efficiency, I think that's kind of where we need to go as a business.
Yeah, and not only, I agree with you, because we've been in touch with a lot of brands, and especially in the launching, stages, and it allows you to see how not to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
How not to proceed. So test and grow it every time, and that builds up into a better product every time, right? So I'm amazed of how the embracing of this ever-changing adaptation to being I was talking to, and this just came to mind, the Nestle's CEO for the Americas, and she was saying it's relentless transformation, because if you don't adapt and you don't relaunch whatever is it that you have without losing, the equity and all that I'm sure that you are very, keen on respecting and keeping, but it's kind of the motor that pulls you to drive forward, and that takes me to my next question, Nick. How do you manage global? That's a very scary word, global brand experience. It's a brand that goes across different cultures. How do you do it?
The secret key.
Yeah.
I think for me, the first part of good brand building is understanding what the brand stands for, what its purpose is, why it exists in the world, why consumers love it, why they should be part of its community. If you can't really understand the key insight behind that, it becomes a significant problem for brand building, full stop. But if you really understand that insight well, it can act as an incredible foundation for brand building. Now, the next part of it, in my view, is then understanding the brand's personalities, its behaviors, its values, and so forth, which is much more around tonality. It's much more abstract, and often that can be the hard bit to understand. But I think, with global brand building, we have so many fantastic tools to then start to disseminate how the brand should behave in varying different situations. And having a good group of people centrally that can help build the tools that allow markets to, I guess, have a good start for building the brands, but also not giving them a set rule book for the brand must behave in exactly this way, allows people a certain degree of ownership. It allows them a length to actually innovate within their own roles, but with the brand as a platform to do it. And hopefully their purpose also intersects with the brand's purpose. And I think this is kind of the understanding that we're moving to, is sometimes brand guardianship can be seen as something of a policing role, but it's not. Good guardianship is about setting a set of parameters, a way of working that the business understands. And I suppose my role as a brand experience lead within Reckitt is about setting those principles, those values that people can utilize as a platform for building the brand in all kinds of different markets. I think Vanish specifically is in 76 different markets worldwide. As you know, we have plenty of other brands in our portfolio that are even larger than that.
Yeah, and you were saying, to building up that brand experience, the key is the consumer journey, right? The journey of, and one that varies from country to country, from time zone to time zone. How do you connect that to the innovation portion of it?
Yeah, good question. So I think first we've got to recognize where we have been. Brands previously were quite one-dimensional. They sat in one-dimensional spaces to a certain degree, simple channels, bricks and mortar retail, and the rule book was fairly clear on how to win there. The world is changing quite significantly, of course. We have more channels than ever before, more conversations happening about brands, and whether you're there to be part of those conversations as a brand or not, they're still going to happen. There's still going to be conversations about your brand and on a channel. So I think that's part of what we have to acknowledge, that when we talk about building innovations, bringing them to life, we need to consider the journey we want to take people on. What channels are they engaging with? What target audiences are we aiming for? In order to be quite focused on making sure that journey is nailed, in terms of trying to drive people from that first point of awareness of an interesting innovation through to that point of advocacy, that point in which they've fallen in love and are willing to kind of share their experiences with the world.
Yeah, and I would imagine that if you harness and promote innovation globally, I would imagine that it's a challenge to keep the brand within a certain guideline, right? What challenges do brands often face trying to meet the identity of their brand book, but also they want to be innovative, they want to innovate. And so let's say somebody from Indonesia, they want to just be creative enough to innovate within your parameters, but sure. But again, they need to respect the guidelines that you give them. It's like you were mentioning earlier before, it's not policing, it's just looking at people trying to respect and follow those guidelines. So my question is how do you manage that challenge? Because it's kind of we've been there, done that. It's impossible to be the police, but then again to satisfy the need of that innovation. How do you do it?
I think first of all we've got to define what innovation is, and a very brilliant lecturer of mine many years ago said, innovation is a change that brings new value to people. It's a very straightforward definition, but a change can be quite radical. It can be what people refer to as moonshots. Equally, it can be quite small. It could be an individual way of working. It can be quite incremental. So I think the first thing to note is that I want everyone to believe in anyone's work that they are innovators. They have the ability to make change for the better. Now, the other thing to realize, I suppose, is when we're talking about change, we need to understand what we're changing for. What is that end goal? Why are we doing it? And I think that comes back to our previous conversation, that if you are clearly defined what your purpose is of your brand. Now, for Vanish, that's about keeping clothes in circulation for as long as possible. It allows anyone to innovate within that. It can be a small-scale marketing innovation, allows people to, I don't know, target specific user groups in their market. It can be something much more significant. It could be how you think about the products that are coming through in your innovation pipelines if you're in the research and development center. But if you're clear on what that North Star is, it has the ability to cement so many different people within a business behind it and really, really drive cultural change within an organization, which will disseminate in the way you talk about your brands externally to your end users, to your communities, on the channels that you want to engage with them on.
Yeah. And recently I heard you talk about the importance of personification of brands, right? And the importance of having an identity and living to it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's it's something that started off as a kind of little piece of thinking that my headphones sort of died when I was just going on a trip, and I was really frustrated by this. And it was a sort of market-leading headphone brand, and I was a bit frustrated by that experience, to be honest. When I had to go and complain about it, I was given the opportunity to just open WhatsApp. I could have a discussion with someone on the other end of WhatsApp about what happened and why, and have those headphones fixed, replaced, whatever, in a period of time. And I suddenly realized I'm not having a conversation with a person. Their tone of voice, the way they spoke to me, through the channel that they were using, it was from the brand. And so I was sat there thinking, this is brand personification. You're no longer talking to an individual representative of a brand, you're just talking to the brand directly. And this idea of personification is coming through in so many different channels as channels massively expand. You can talk to a brand on Facebook, or any other meta platform. You can talk to brands in all kinds of different ways. And so you have to be really clear about what your brand stands for, what its personality is, and that defines things like its tone of voice. And you can have a lot of fun with that. You know, I've often said that maybe we should start looking at kind of celebrity archetypes to think about, okay, well, can that help kind of guide the communications you might have? Often said that Vanish might be Jonathan Van Ness from Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, because he has such a brilliant way about him. He's super open and honest about the way he communicates, but equally he talks about how you can revive personalities and things like that. So there's some quite nice synergies there. But what that allows you to seed in your mind is when you're thinking through creative executions, does that take you down a different path? And how do you bring that personality to life, and how do you personify it in your own brand?
So building a brand is difficult, like you were saying, and when you have so many brands, what do you focus on? Because they have distant personalities. So one can be more aggressive, the other one can be more conservative, one focuses on more reusable, the other one, how do you focus, or what do you focus on?
I mean, we have to firstly get a clear understanding of our markets. As I said, our brands operate across multiple different markets that all have their own cultural nuances, different ways of talking to their users and so forth. But you then need to distill it down to some core areas for the brand that you can really focus on. Now, the second part, I think, is kind of interesting because from a global seat, working with those markets to really understand the journeys that they want to take their users on. What kind of channels are their users consuming in terms of social, in terms of e-commerce, in terms of in-store and so forth? There are commonalities. And that allows us to kind of start thinking about what are the user journeys that we want to build, as we were talking about earlier, to take someone from the point of initial awareness to the point of advocacy. That is going to change per market.
So the main focus on different brands with distinct personality has to be the adaptation, depending on the culture, depending on the need, and depending on the influence.
Yeah.
So, and I'm gonna jump into some concept that is different now.
Yeah.
And with this now generation, which we call it, and that's how we ended up creating this podcast, right? Is that every generation has their own "I want it now" moment, right? And it's translated into instant gratification. So I want it to happen now. And everybody has it, from the baby boomers, from the Y generation, right? So you as a global experience lead and having all those brands, do you see this, how do you engage either in the point of sale, the retail level, or at the online level to fulfill this instant gratification? How do you come about even seeking this challenge to be fulfilled?
I think instant gratification is a super interesting topic because actually you can flip it. You can see it as a slightly different opportunity. You can either reward people very immediately, or you can start to look at the points within that user journey where there's quiet, where someone might not be interacting with their brand when they could be. There is always, I suppose, to a certain degree, going to be points within a journey that people will be waiting for something to happen, for some sort of engagement with the brand to happen. That could be literally ordering something and waiting for it to turn up in the post with e-commerce. That could be, okay, I've just used my product, now what? And those kind of silent areas allow us as brand owners to start thinking about, how do I use them? What do I use them for? And how do I take people on a journey? But being smart in the way you reward people at different parts of the journey, it allows you to psychologically tap into all kinds of reward centers in the mind. Now, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
There's a very famous restaurateur in the UK. I wish I'd been to one of his restaurants, but Heston Blumenthal, you've probably heard of him.
Yeah.
He has one of the largest waiting lists in the UK at the moment for one of his restaurants. Now, rather than just letting people wait, he's had to think about a whole host of different touch points he wants to have with that user to then make that end experience in his restaurant incredible. So it's this whole idea of building a crescendo to the moment of finally engaging with his brand and his food. So he's not just going, right, I've got a 3-month waiting list, let people wait. He's really thinking about that journey all the way up. So you have this fantastic runway up to that final experience.
Wow. Really? It's amazing. I didn't know that could even happen. Take advantage of, of an experience that is not such a good experience and building your brand into that, right?
And I think keeping your eye on these quiet moments, that actually it could be really useful to have a conversation as a brand with someone, or it can target those reward centers, it can build excitement, it can do all kinds of different things. And those are the areas that are really exciting in terms of, I think, media and marketing innovation.
Okay. Moving to customer feedback.
Sure.
And not listening to anybody, just doing what you can or what you want, or the other way around, listening to whatever they want you to do and doing it. Where do you draw the line between listening to what people want out of your brand and keeping your identity and your purpose as a brand? How do you take on that middle point?
I had a look before I joined you today on this podcast, at the Twitter accounts for a few sneaker brands.
Okay.
And it really interested me how they're utilizing community fostering. Now, as we said earlier, conversations about brands are going to happen whether the brands are there to engage it or not. That's a reality. So being able to utilize those conversations to potentially, for example, course correct when things are going wrong. I'll give the example of Nike because it was a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Someone was unhappy with the fact that they had got through a certain amount of trainers, sneakers. They had kind of run through them super quickly. They're degraded. And instead of ignoring it, Nike came back and said, tell us why, give us some photos, we'll be really interested, and we'll course correct it. We'll change your upset to something kind of much better, and we'll potentially give you some advice on the type of sneakers that maybe are more fit for your exercise regime. I thought that was super smart. There was another brand which I found absolutely fascinating. It was, I think it's sneakers, but Tom's.
Yeah.
Super community focused. Again, someone had said, can you please bring back your glow-in-the-dark sneakers? And so Tom's had kind of responded and said, okay, that's really interesting. Come in and tell us why you think they're brilliant and how we can improve them. So you can then start to see how people or how brands are actually taking maybe what's a problem or a conversation, saying, come over here, let's have a chat about that. And then it starts to fuel things like product innovation. They're embracing people that want to actively engage in their product development. So you can start to see how you can course correct stuff that's going wrong, you can use things for product development, and generally kind of improve the conversations. And then the final example I have was with a brand that I'm kind of interested in at the moment, only because I'm wearing them, Allbirds.
Oh, Allbirds, yeah.
Great sneaker, really enjoy them, fantastic for travel. This is not an advert for Allbirds, by the way. But someone had gone on to their Twitter and just said they had a fantastic experience with a customer services rep that they had. You know, there was something going wrong. Whoever this customer services rep had fixed it very quickly. And then Allbirds came back again and said, okay, well, we'll reward that individual. So you can then see how you can utilize those conversations for even rewarding people that are working for your brand. So you can see how you engage those conversations. You can actually learn a lot. You get a lot of insight. You get a lot of reward. Whereas if you don't engage in those conversations, if you're not part of them, you won't gain that insight. You won't be able to develop your projects. You won't be able to course correct. You might create frustration even in your brand. And that's why I'm super passionate that if there are conversations happening, the brand should be part of it. And to our conversation earlier, the brand can own it. They can be personified in it. They can have their own unique humor, their own unique personality, their own unique seriousness, if that's kind of what they're about. So I think all these emerging channels are just opportunities to have much richer, much more involved conversations with the users and the communities of our brands.
Wow, yeah. It's impressive how companies take a lot into consideration this part of the feedback, right? And build it into their products and their experiences. And yeah, I mean, we've been talking a lot about innovation, about the now gen, and like everything else, I mean, even this wonderful show, it needs to come to an end. So before we end up, I want you to tell us, from your perspective, the audience that is listening to you right now, either can be, you know, the mom and pop brand specialists, all the way to the CMO for, you know, Singaporean brand. What would you tell them would be the takeaway of this podcast talking about today?
It's a really good question. And I think for me, it's about understanding that brands can be a platform for good. Innovation, maybe I'm adding two in here. Innovation can also be micro innovation. It can also be macro innovation. And understanding where you want to take your brand to be a force for good can fuel the innovation pipeline. And I think if you have a clear understanding of those principles, then there's nothing stopping you. And I feel that we need to acknowledge something a little bit here, which is the Barbie movie. I know it's it's
Yeah,
it's the
special.
topic of the day. So I
It's
feel like
interesting, yeah.
we have to be the cliches that talk about it on a podcast that's right now. So
For sure, yeah.
and I mean, I was considering this the other day, that actually there's a massive innovation that's happening in that movie right now in terms of how they're utilizing CGI and AI for making super immersive worlds that are going to fundamentally change the world of filmography. But no one's talking about that. Everyone's talking about the movie itself because of fantastic casting, because of the incredible amount of investment that's gone into marketing it, because of the global shortage of fluorescent pink paint, which, you know, me being a owner of a pink brand, would have to be a little bit excited about.
Yes, I can imagine.
But you can see how a single-minded direction of bring an iconic toy to life, Barbie, has unified so many people, from innovation within filmography to marketers to the way we do casting to all kinds of different parts of filming. And you can start to see that if you are very clear about how those brands work, where they're going, that you can create something super special, super viral, that spreads a message all over the world and hopefully gives people a bit of nostalgia at the same time. So I kind of wanted to drop it in as a reference because we had to, really, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, no, it has to be, because if not, you cannot lay out an example that is really applicable to really see how you can improve whatever is it that your challenge might be.
Yeah.
Because, you know, a lot of the listeners out there went to watch the movie,
Yeah.
right? And they're talking about it, and they're making their own interpretation of it. So it's always good. It's, of course, not something that we promote,
Yeah.
but it's just something that comes out of the conversation of brand talks. And well, thank you for that insight, Nick. And I appreciate all the time that you have put into this first in-person podcast here at 1-to-1, that they are we are having 20 years since the foundation of the company, since the creation. So yes, thank you. And where can people reach out to you if they wanted to connect?
Please feel free. I'm on LinkedIn. My handle's NW Horan, and absolutely happy to chat and kind of learn more from our broader community that watches Now Gen podcast. But thank you so much for having me and in this incredible studio. And I think what people can't see around here is just the incredible amount of people in the background over here that are operating cameras and lighting and so forth. So I really appreciate the kind of work that they're doing as well to kind of make us hopefully look okay.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that we're going to have AI and have a couple people here and change things around. Thank you very much, Nick. We've been talking to Nick Horan. He's the global brand experience lead for Reckitt. And please stay tuned. We're very happy that this is once in a lifetime experience that we had for the podcast. 2 years since we created, and such a wonderful lineup of guests, including Nick. Thank you for coming all the way here to present this. And don't miss the next episode, because we're always talking about what brands are doing to make the now generation engage more with their challenge and their day-to-day needs. So thank you very much, and see you later.